The courtroom doors burst open, and Quinn Harlow stood frozen as security guards dragged footage onto the screen. Her and Brody Lawson tangled in bedsheets. Champagne bottles scattered around a hotel suite paid for with $410 million she'd stolen from her husband. But here's the twist that'll make your jaw drop. That modest executive husband she'd dismiss as powerless? He didn't just own the pharmaceutical company Brody worked for. He owned the entire $5.1 trillion empire that controlled medicine prices across 73 countries. And the man Quinn thought would make her visible, the lover who promised her spotlight and purpose, he was about to sell her out to save himself from prison. But wait, because the real shock comes when you find out who Brody actually is to Harlan. Stick around, because this story gets darker than you can imagine. Have you ever felt invisible in your own life? Like no matter what you did, nobody really saw you? Or maybe you trusted the wrong person and watched your world burn because of it. Then you need to hear this. Hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling me about a time someone betrayed your trust. And smash subscribe because this tale is about to take you on a ride. Let's get into it. Quinn Harlow grew up in a house where achievements died in silence. Straight A's? Her father glanced up from his newspaper for 3 seconds. Full scholarship to Yale? Her mother said, "That's nice, dear," and went back to her crossword. Quinn learned early that being good wasn't enough. You had to be seen being good. You had to shine so bright that people couldn't look away. That hunger followed her into adulthood like a shadow she couldn't shake. Now, at 38, she stood in the walk-in closet of their Connecticut estate. 14,000 square feet of tasteful luxury that somehow still felt small, and stared at her reflection in floor-length mirrors. Beautiful, polished, utterly invisible. "I'm heading to the Geneva conference," Harlan called from the bedroom, his voice flat as always. "I'll be back Thursday." Quinn didn't turn around. "Have a good trip." Harlan Voss was her husband of 11 years. Quiet, controlled. He worked as some kind of executive at a pharmaceutical company called Pharmaforge. Mid-level position. She'd always assumed. Comfortable salary. Nothing spectacular. Their joint account showed $500 million in investments. Family money, Harlan claimed, from trusts and inheritories. Quinn never dug deeper. Why would she? The money was there. That's what mattered. Except it wasn't enough to make her feel real. "Quinn." Harlan appeared in the closet doorway, briefcase in hand. His eyes, gray and unreadable, studied her. "Are you all right?" "Fine." He stepped closer, and that's when she noticed it again. The scar on his left hand, running from his thumb to his wrist like a pale lightning bolt. She'd asked about it once, years ago. "Old accident," he'd said, and changed the subject. Now, Harlan touched her shoulder gently. "You seem distant lately." "Because I am," Quinn thought. "Because living with you is like living with a ghost who pays the bills." "Just tired," she said. Harlan nodded, accepting the lie because that's what they did. Accepted each other's lies and called it marriage. After he left, Quinn pulled out her phone and texted, "He's gone. Come over." The response was immediate. "Already on my way, beautiful. Brody Lawson." Now there was a man who saw her. Brody showed up 40 minutes later, his tie loosened, that hungry look in his eyes that made Quinn feel like the only woman alive. "I've been thinking about you all day," he said, pulling her against him in the foyer. "Sitting in those pointless meetings, watching my boss drone on about quarterly earnings, all I could think about was this." His kiss tasted like ambition and rage and something delicious. They barely made it to the couch. Afterward, tangled in expensive throws with the afternoon sun painting their skin gold, Brody traced patterns on her collarbone and talked about his dreams. "You know what the problem is with this country?" he asked. "Medicine is controlled by faceless corporations that hoard cures behind patents and price tags. People die because they can't afford insulin. Kids go blind because eye treatments cost more than houses. And guys like my boss at Pharmaforge, they're the worst." Quinn propped herself up on one elbow. "Your boss." "The whole company. They price gouge governments, lobby to extend patents, crush smaller competitors who try to innovate." Brody's jaw clenched. "I work there and I hate it, but I'm learning, watching. Planning. Planning what? His eyes met hers, blazing. To build something better. Clinics that actually help people. Medicine that's affordable. A system that rewards courage instead of greed. Quinn's heart raced. This was it. This was the feeling she'd been chasing her whole life. Being part of something that mattered, something visible. I want to help, she said. Brody grinned. I was hoping you'd say that. Over the next month, they built their plan. Brody had connections, knowledge of pharmaceutical supply chains, insider information on how the big companies operated. Quinn had access to capital, that $500 million sitting in accounts Harlan barely monitored. He won't even notice, Brody assured her. Rich guys like him, they're so detached from their own money. By the time he figures it out, we'll already be unstoppable. Quinn wanted to believe that. She needed to believe that. Because the alternative, that she was throwing away her marriage for a fantasy, was too painful to consider. One night, Harlan came home early from work and found Quinn in his study, using his computer. She jumped, slamming the laptop shut. You scared me. Sorry. He set down his briefcase, eyes moving from her guilty face to the closed computer. What were you working on? Just looking at charity organizations. Thinking about getting more involved in philanthropy. Harlan nodded slowly. That's good. You've always wanted to do something meaningful. The comment hit like a slap. Did he know? Could he tell she was drowning in their perfect, empty life? Harlan, do you ever feel like we're just existing? Like we're going through motions, but not actually living? He was quiet for a long moment. Then he walked to the window overlooking their manicured grounds. 3 acres of Connecticut perfection that cost more to maintain than most people earned in a year. I feel that every day, he said softly. Quinn's throat tightened. For a second, she almost told him everything, almost confessed about Brody, about the plan, about how invisible she felt in their marriage. But then Harlan turned, and his face was that same control mask he always wore. I have a trip coming up, he said. 2 weeks in Europe. Board meetings, investor conferences. The usual. Okay. Will you be all right here alone? Quinn thought about Brody, about freedom, about finally being seen. I'll be fine. After Harlan went to bed, Quinn returned to the computer. She'd been transferring funds into a new account, one Harlan didn't know about. $410 million so far. Enough to launch Brody's clinic chain, to make a real difference, to finally matter. She clicked the final transfer and watched the numbers shift. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Visibility comes at a cost. Quinn stared at the message, her blood running cold. But before she could process it, another text arrived from Brody. Did you do it? Are we really doing this? She deleted the unknown message and responded to Brody. It's done. We're free. What Quinn didn't notice was the tiny device attached to the underside of Harlan's desk. A tracker, a recorder, a window into everything she'd done. Harlan stood in the hallway outside his study, listening through an earbud and smiled. Let them build first, he whispered to himself. The divorce papers arrived via email, while Harlan was in Geneva. Quinn sent them at 2 a.m., drunk on wine and possibility, with Brody beside her whispering encouragement. You deserve better. You deserve to be seen. Send them. So she did. The email was brief. Harlan, this marriage has been over for years. We both know it. My lawyer will contact you about asset division. I'm taking what's mine and building something that matters. For once in my life, I'm choosing myself. Don't fight this. You'll lose. She pressed send and turned to Brody, who pulled her into a kiss that tasted like champagne and victory. To us, he said, raising his glass. To the empire we're about to build. They toasted in the penthouse suite of a Manhattan hotel, paid for with money that used to sit in accounts bearing Harlan's name. What Quinn didn't know was that Harlan sat in his Geneva hotel room, reading her email on his laptop, and his smile never wavered. Perfect, he murmured. 6 weeks later, the first Medicare Now clinic opened in Brooklyn. The press coverage was massive. Socialite Quinn Harlow launches revolutionary affordable healthcare chain. The headline screamed. Photos of Quinn cutting ribbons. shaking hands with patients, glowing under camera flashes that finally saw her. Brody stood beside her, his hand on the small of her back, radiating pride. "This is just the beginning," he told reporters. For too long, healthcare has been controlled by corporate monopolies that care more about profits than people. Medicare now is different. We're offering quality treatment at prices people can actually afford. The model was brilliant. Brody had designed it during his years at Pharmaforge, learning the system from the inside. Generic medications, streamlined operations, partnerships with overseas manufacturers who could undercut American prices by 70%. Patients flooded in. News outlets called it disruptive. Investors lined up, throwing money at the venture. Within 3 months, they'd opened 5 more clinics across New York and New Jersey. Quinn's phone never stopped ringing. Interview requests, partnership offers, invitations to galas and conferences. She was on magazine covers, trend lists, 40 under 40 features. Finally visible. Finally real. "You're glowing," Brody said one night in bed. Their bed now, in a Tribeca loft with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city that had once ignored her. "I feel alive," Quinn admitted. "For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that matters." Brody kissed her forehead. "That's because you are. We're changing the game. Beautiful. We're proving that you don't have to be a heartless corporation to win. Courage and vision, that's what builds empires." Quinn wanted to ask him about something that had been nagging at her, a detail she'd noticed in his background research. But Brody's hands were sliding down her body, and the question dissolved into pleasure. The question was this: how did a mid-level manager at Pharmaforge know so much about pharmaceutical logistics, patent law, and international supply chains? It was the kind of knowledge that took decades to acquire, the kind you didn't get from sitting in middle management. But Quinn pushed the thought away. She was too busy being seen to notice the shadows gathering. Harlan returned from Europe and didn't contest the divorce. His lawyer sent a brief response. "Mr. Voss accepts the terms and wishes Ms. Harlow well in her future endeavors." No fight, no anger, just acceptance. Quinn should have been relieved. Instead, she felt unsettled. "He's probably embarrassed," Brody suggested when she mentioned it. "Guys like him, they hate public spectacle. He'll take the L quietly and move on." That made sense. Harlan had always avoided conflict, preferring his controlled, quiet existence. So Quinn focused on the clinics. By month 4, they had 12 locations and growing demand. The media loved the story. Socialite turned healthcare revolutionary, taking on big pharma with compassion and courage. Then the first whisper arrived. An anonymous tip to the New York Department of Health claimed that Medicare now was using medication from unlicensed overseas suppliers. The investigation went nowhere. Everything checked out legally, but it planted seeds of doubt. 2 weeks later, a patent attorney sent Brody a letter claiming one of their clinic protocols violated intellectual property owned by Pharmaforge. "It's garbage," Brody insisted, crumpling the letter. "They're trying to scare us because we're cutting into their profits." Classic corporate intimidation. But Quinn noticed something odd. The patent in question covered a diagnostic process for identifying early-stage diseases. Exactly the process Brody had implemented across all their clinics. "Where'd you learn this diagnostic method?" she asked. Brody hesitated, just for a second. But Quinn saw it. "I told you, I studied this stuff for years at Pharmaforge. Watched how they operated. Learned from the inside. But this specific protocol." "Quinn," Brody's voice sharpened. "Do you trust me or not?" She nodded quickly. "Of course I do." But that night, alone in the loft while Brody worked late, Quinn Googled the patent number. It had been filed 8 years ago by a researcher named Dr. Killian Cross. The registered company, Pharmaforge International Holdings. Quinn's hand shook as she scrolled through the documentation. The protocol wasn't just similar to what Brody used. It was identical, word for word, down to the specific lab equipment requirements. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her press accept. "Hello." Silence. Then a voice she hadn't heard in months. Calm, controlled, familiar. Hello, Quinn. Harlan, how did you get this number? I've always had this number. I paid for the phone, remember? A pause. How are the clinics going? Quinn's mouth went dry. What do you want? Just checking in. I saw you on the news. You look happy. Visible even. His tone was mild, conversational. That's all you ever wanted, wasn't it? To be seen? Harlan, there's something you should know about Brody. Another pause, longer this time. Ask him about the scar on my hand. Ask him how he knows about it. The line went dead. Quinn sat frozen, the phone trembling in her grip. How would Brody know about Harlan's scar? The raid happened on a Tuesday morning. 3 weeks later, Quinn was at the flagship Brooklyn clinic, doing a photo shoot for a healthcare magazine, when sirens screamed outside. 6 Department of Health vehicles, federal marshals, investigators carrying boxes and computers. What's happening? Quinn demanded, pushing through the growing crowd. A woman in a government jacket turned to her, clipboard in hand. Are you Quinn Harlow? Yes. We have warrants to seize records and equipment related to potential regulatory violations, clinical trial data falsification, unlicensed medication distribution, and fraud. The words hit like punches. That's insane. We've done nothing wrong. But the investigators were already moving to the clinic, boxing up files, interviewing staff, shutting down operations. Quinn's phone exploded with calls. The other 11 clinics were being raided simultaneously. She tried calling Brody. Voicemail. Tried again. Voicemail. Panic clawed up her throat. Where was he? Then she saw it. On the intake desk, partially hidden under a stack of patient forms, was Brody's gym bag. He'd left it there this morning. Said he'd pick it up after his meeting. Quinn grabbed it, planning to call him again when something fell out. A burner phone. Old model. Cheap. The kind you bought at gas stations for cash. Her hands shook as she turned it on. 3 recent calls. All to the same number. Quinn pressed redial. It rang twice. Then a voice answered. Calm. Controlled. Harlan's voice. Hello, Brody. Are we ready for phase 2? Quinn's world tilted sideways. No. No, 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 no. She scrolled through the text messages on the burner phone. Months of conversations between Brody and Harlan. Strategies. Updates. Confirmations. She transferred another $50 million today. Running total for $110 million. Good. Let her build the clinics. Let her feel powerful. The fall will be sweeter. I'm not sure I can keep doing this. I think I actually care about her. You care about not being second place anymore. Remember what I promised you. Remember why we're doing this. Quinn dropped the phone like it had burned her. The room spun. Voices echoed. Investigators brushed past her, but she couldn't move. Everything, all of it, had been a setup. Brody, the clinics, the visibility, the purpose, all of it orchestrated by the man she dismissed as powerless. Her phone buzzed. A text from Harlan's number. You wanted to be seen. Quinn, congratulations. The whole world is watching. And in that moment, standing in the ruins of her empire with sirens wailing and cameras flashing, Quinn finally understood. She'd never been invisible because she wasn't good enough. She'd been invisible because she'd married a ghost who controlled everything from the shadows. And now that ghost was about to destroy her. Federal investigators led Quinn outside, past cameras and microphones thrust in her face. Ms. Harlow, did you know about the falsified trial data? Ms. Harlow, is it true you stole over $400 million from your ex-husband? Ms. Harlow, where's Brody Lawson? She had no answers, no defenses, no plan, just a growing, terrible realization that she'd never been playing the game. She'd been the game piece. And the man moving her across the board? He'd been 3 moves ahead the entire time. Quinn's lawyer met her at the police station with devastating news. They have everything. Bank records, emails, testimony from Brody Lawson himself. He's cooperating with investigators. Quinn, he's blaming you for everything. The man who'd made her feel seen had just made her the villain in front of the entire world. And somewhere in a Geneva hotel room or a Connecticut estate or whatever shadowy corner he operated from, Harlan Voss was smiling. Because phase 2 was just beginning. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. Quinn sat on the metal bench, still wearing the designer dress from her magazine photo shoot, and tried to understand how her life had imploded in 6 hours. Her lawyer, Daphne Reeves, sat across from her with a folder thick enough to be a weapon. They have you on wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit healthcare fraud, and about 17 other charges I'm still reading through. Daphne's voice was clinical, professional. The prosecution has bank records showing you transferred $410 million from joint accounts without authorization. They have emails between you and Brody discussing the clinic expansion. They have testimony from Brody himself claiming you orchestrated everything. He's lying. Quinn's voice cracked. Brody planned this with me. It was his idea. Brody Lawson is currently sitting in a federal prosecutor's office, providing evidence that you coerced him into the scheme using your relationship. He's painting himself as a victim of your manipulation. Quinn laughed. It came out wrong, jagged. That's insane. None of this makes sense. Why would Brody turn on me? We were building something together. Daphne leaned forward. Quinn, I need you to focus. Who is Harlan Voss? I mean, really, who is he? My ex-husband. He works at Pharmaforge, some executive position. No. Daphne opened her folder and slid documents across the table. Harlan Voss is the sole owner of Pharmaforge International Holdings through a network of shell companies and offshore trusts. He's not an executive. He's the founder. The entire company, 5.1 trillion in assets, belongs to him. The words didn't compute. Quinn stared at the documents. Corporate filings, trust agreements, ownership structures so complex they look like spider webs, all leading back to one name, Harlan Voss. That's impossible. We lived in Connecticut. We had a nice house, but it wasn't. He drove a normal car. He worked normal hours. If he owned $1 trillion company, why would he hide it? Daphne finished. That's the question prosecutors are asking too. And the answer they're finding is disturbing. Harlan Voss built Pharmaforge from nothing 23 years ago. He owns it entirely through hidden structures. No partners. No board he answers to. Complete control. Quinn's hands trembled. Why didn't I know this? Because he didn't want you to know. The question is why. Before Quinn could answer, the door opened. A federal agent stepped in, followed by someone Quinn never expected to see. Harlan. He looked the same, gray suit, controlled expression, that scar on his hand catching fluorescent light. But now Quinn saw him differently. This wasn't a quiet executive. This was a predator who'd been playing with his food. I need a moment with my wife, Harlan said calmly. Ex-wife, Quinn spat. Harlan smiled. The divorce isn't finalized yet. Actually, legal technicality. We're still married in the eyes of the law. The agent glanced at Daphne. 5 minutes. They left Quinn alone with the man who destroyed her. Harlan sat across from Quinn, adjusting his cuffs with that maddening precision he always had. You look tired, he observed. What do you want? I want to offer you a deal. Quinn barked a laugh. A deal? You set me up. You and Brody planned this whole thing to humiliate me. Not to humiliate. To teach. Harlan's voice remained calm. You stole from me, Quinn, $410 million. You thought I was too detached to notice, too weak to fight back. You were wrong on both counts. I took money from our joint accounts. Accounts I created, money I earned, assets I built while you spent your days feeling invisible and sorry for yourself. His eyes hardened. Did you ever wonder where that money came from? How a mid-level executive had $500 million in investments. Quinn's throat tightened. You said family trusts. I lied. Every dollar came from Pharmaforge, from the empire I built in secret while you dismissed me as powerless. Why? Why hide it? Harlan was quiet for a long moment. Then he held up his scarred hand. When I was 12 years old, my father owned a successful pharmaceutical distribution company. Not huge, but comfortable. We had money, status, security. Then he made bad decisions, borrowed too much, expanded too fast, trusted the wrong partners. Within 2 years, we lost everything. He flexed his fingers, the scar tissue catching the light. The day the bankruptcy finalized, my father had a breakdown, smashed everything in his office. I tried to stop him, to calm him down. He threw a glass paperweight. It shattered against the wall, and a shard went through my hand. Harlan's voice never wavered. While I bled on the floor, my father looked at me and said, "This is what chaos gets you, Harlan. This is what happens when you lose control." Quinn felt something crack inside her chest. All these years married to this man, and she'd never known. "I built Pharmamour to never be chaotic," Harlan continued. "Complete control, no partners who could betray me, no public shareholders demanding quarterly returns. Just me, making decisions, maintaining structure. And me? Where did I fit in your structure world? You were supposed to be different. Someone who didn't know about the empire, who couldn't want it for the wrong reasons. Someone who might actually love me instead of what I could provide." His mask slipped slightly. I was wrong about that too. Quinn wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something. "You're insane. You manipulated everything. I gave you choices. You chose Brody. You chose to steal. You chose visibility over loyalty." Harlan stood. "Now you'll live with those choices. Unless you take my deal." "What deal?" "Return what you stole. Publicly admit to fraud. Testify that Brody was an accomplice, not a victim. Do this, and I'll make sure you serve minimal time. 2 years, maybe 3. Comfortable facility. You'll survive. And if I refuse?" Harlan's smile was ice. "Then I bury you. 25 years minimum. Maximum security. And when you get out, you'll be 70 years old, forgotten by everyone except the people who use you as a cautionary tale." He walked to the door, then paused. "You want to be seen, Quinn. Careful what you wish for." The media circus was relentless. Socialite healthcare fraud exposed. Medicare Now founder arrested in $410 million scheme. Brody Lawson, victim or accomplice? Quinn watched the coverage from Daphne's office after making bail. $3 million that drained what little remained in her personal accounts. Brody appeared on every major network, his face a mask of wounded betrayal. "I loved her," he told a sympathetic CNN anchor. "I believed in her vision for affordable health care. I thought we were changing the world together. I had no idea she was using stolen money, falsifying permits, lying to regulators. When I found out, I immediately went to authorities." "Liar," Quinn screamed at the television. But America loved a redemption story. And Brody was selling himself as the idealistic middle manager who'd been seduced and manipulated by a wealthy, bored socialite looking for purpose. The truth didn't matter. The narrative did. Quinn's phone buzzed constantly with messages from former friends, all of them distancing themselves. Invitations withdrawn. Partnerships dissolved. Her face became synonymous with privilege and fraud. Meanwhile, the clinic raids uncovered real problems. Falsified clinical trial data on 2 experimental treatments Brody had pushed. Medications from suppliers that, while technically legal, operated in gray areas of international law. Permits that had been rushed through approval processes using Brody's Pharmamour connections. "He set me up perfectly," Quinn realized aloud. "Every shortcut, every questionable decision, it was all Brody's idea, but my name is on the paperwork." Daphne nodded grimly. He knew exactly what he was doing. The question is why? What does Brody get out of destroying you? The answer came 3 days later, delivered in an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single document, a DNA test. Participants: Harlan Voss and Brody Lawson. Result: 99.97% probability, a paternal relationship. Quinn read it 7 times, each reading making her stomach turn harder. Brody was Harlan's son. The truth came in pieces, assembled through Daphne's investigator and Quinn's own desperate research. 26 years ago, Harlan had a brief relationship with a woman named Iris Lawson. He was building Pharmaforge, obsessed with control and structure, barely 27 years old. When Iris got pregnant, Harlan offered financial support, but couldn't offer himself. He was too consumed by his father's bankruptcy trauma, too afraid of chaos. Iris raised Brody alone, took Harlan's money, but kept the boy away from his father's world. Until Brody turned 23. That's when Harlan reached out, offering Brody a position at Pharmaforge. Not as family, but as protege. Harlan saw himself in Brody. The hunger, the ambition, the desperate need to prove something. For 3 years, Harlan groomed Brody for leadership, taught him pharmaceutical logistics, patent law, supply chain management, showed him the empire's inner workings, treated him like the successor he'd never had. But Brody had wounds of his own. Growing up without a father, always second place in school, passed over for promotions because he lacked executive presence. The rejection festered, and when Harlan's mentorship felt more like control than love, Brody's ideology hardened. Corporate empires were prisons. Real change required disruption. The break happened 2 years ago. Brody proposed radical reforms to Pharmaforge, slashing drug prices, opening patents, prioritizing access over profit. Harlan refused. Their argument was nuclear. "You're just like your grandfather," Brody had screamed, "building empires while people suffer." "And you're chaos," Harlan replied. "You want to tear down structure without understanding why it exists." Brody quit that day, or so Quinn thought. The truth was darker. Harlan and Brody made a deal. "Test her," Harlan had said. "See if she's capable of loyalty. If she chooses you over me, if she steals and betrays, then she was never worth keeping. And you'll get what you've always wanted, a chance to build something without my shadow." "And if she doesn't betray you?" Brody asked. "Then maybe I was wrong about both of you." It was a sick test, a psychological experiment designed by a man so traumatized by chaos that he couldn't trust without breaking people first. And Quinn had failed. Or had she? Because reading through the documents, Quinn saw something Harlan might have missed. Brody's emails to his mother showed real conflict. "I think I'm falling for her, Mom. This was supposed to be just business. But she's different than I expected. She actually cares about the clinics, about helping people. You can't tell Dad. He'll think I'm weak. But I don't know if I can go through with this." Brody had genuinely fallen for Quinn. But his need to prove himself to Harlan, to finally be first place in someone's eyes, was stronger than love. So he betrayed her anyway. And now both men, father and son, were destroying her to settle their own sick power struggle. Quinn made a decision. If Harlan and Brody wanted war, she'd give them war. She met with Harlan in a neutral location, a conference room in his lawyer's office. Daphne sat beside her, recording everything. "I'll take your deal," Quinn said, "with modifications." Harlan's eyebrow raised slightly. "I don't negotiate. You will for this. I'll return the money. I'll testify to my role in the fraud. But I want Brody charged too, not as a victim, as an accomplice, because that's what he is." Brody cooperated with investigators. "Brody planned this with you from the beginning." Quinn slid a folder across the table. "I have emails between you two. Dates, strategies, confirmations. Your investigator was sloppy. Harlan. Some of those messages were backed up to cloud servers Brody didn't know I had access to. It was a bluff. Mostly. Quinn had found some emails, but not the smoking gun she needed. But Harlan didn't know that. His face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. "What do you want?" "I want the truth on record. That this was a setup. That Brody was never a victim. That you orchestrated everything to punish me for leaving you. You did leave me. You did steal. Because I felt invisible. Because you hid an entire empire from me. Because you treated our marriage like a control experiment." Quinn's voice broke. "Did you ever actually love me, Harlan? Or was I always just another variable in your structured world?" The silence stretched. Then Harlan said quietly, "I love the idea of you, someone who might want me without knowing what I was worth, someone who might stay without knowing they could take. I love that idea very much. But not me, not the actual person. I didn't know the actual person. And you didn't know me. We were strangers playing house. Quinn felt tears burn her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of him. My offer stands, she said. Brody goes down with me, or I go to every media outlet with what I know. Maybe I can't prove everything in court, but I can make your life very public, very messy, very chaotic. Harlan's jaw tightened. Chaos. His greatest fear. Fine, he said. Brody faces charges. You both serve time. Equal sentences. And one more thing. Quinn leaned forward. The clinics, the ones that actually help people, that provide affordable care. You don't destroy them. You buy them from bankruptcy, clean up the legal mess, and run them legitimately. Make them part of Pharmaforge. Why would I do that? Because somewhere under all that control, you actually do care about people. You donate anonymously to patient funds. Your company develops cures, not just treatments. You're not a monster, Harlan. You're just broken. He stared at her for a long moment. 2 of the clinics can continue, he said finally, under new management, proper oversight. The rest close. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Quinn nodded. The court proceedings were brutal. Quinn and Brody stood side by side as co-defendants, neither looking at each other, while prosecutors detailed their crimes in excruciating detail. The media ate it up. Father and son destroy, socialite. Healthcare fraud trio faces justice. Pharmaforge billionaires twisted revenge. Harlan's ownership of Pharmaforge became public knowledge, sending shockwaves through pharmaceutical markets. Suddenly, the quiet, control company was revealed to be a one-man empire. Investors panicked. Regulators investigated. Competitors smelled blood. For the first time in 23 years, Harlan's structure faced chaos. His board, hand-picked loyalists, voted to force him to appoint independent directors. Government hearings demanded testimony about drug pricing. Public pressure mounted for transparency. And in the middle of it all, Harlan's mother, a woman he hadn't spoken to in 15 years, appeared on television. My son is brilliant, Evelyn Voss told a primetime interviewer, but he's also exactly like his father, so afraid of losing control that he destroys everything beautiful in his life. I warned him about marrying that girl. I told him she deserved better than being a test subject in his psychological experiments. But Harlan doesn't listen. He just calculates. Quinn watched the interview from her apartment, under house arrest pending sentencing. Even Harlan's own mother saw what he was. Meanwhile, Brody's fall was just as complete. His idealistic speeches about affordable health care rang hollow next to fraud charges. Former colleagues testified that he manipulated trial data, endangered patients, cut corners at risk lives, all while claiming moral superiority. The man who positioned himself as a champion of the people was revealed as an opportunist who used suffering as a stepping stone. His mother, Iris, came to court every day, sitting in the gallery with her face buried in her hands, watching her son self-destruct. "I'm sorry, Mom," Brody said during his testimony. "I just wanted Dad to see me as worthy. I want to be first for once." "You were always first with me," Iris whispered, but he didn't hear her. The sentences came down on a gray October morning. Quinn, 4 years in federal prison for $110 million in restitution. Permanent ban from serving on any corporate board. Brody, 5 years in federal prison, $280 million in restitution. His share of the fraud. Lifetime ban from practicing in health care. They both serve in different facilities. They both lose everything. As guards led Quinn away, she looked back at the courtroom one last time. Harlan sat in the gallery, watching with that same controlled expression, but his hands trembled slightly. And Quinn realized. He'd won, but it had cost him too. Prison was everything Quinn feared and nothing she expected. The facility was minimum security, white-collar criminals, most of them, but the loss of freedom crushed her daily. Her cellmate was a former CFO named Jolene, who'd embezzled from a nonprofit. They'd lie in their bunks at night, trading stories about the lives they destroyed. You ever think about what you do different? Jolene asked one night. Quinn stared at the ceiling. I'd have asked Harlan why he was hiding money. I'd have demanded to know who I married instead of just accepting his silence. Think he had told you? No, but at least I would have tried. Outside, the world moved on. The Medicare Now clinics that didn't close became subsidiaries of Pharmaceutical, renamed and restructured. They continued providing affordable care, just as Quinn had envisioned, but now under Harlan's control. It was her legacy, stripped of her name. Meanwhile, Pharmaceutical hemorrhaged money as public scrutiny intensified. Congressional hearings demanded price transparency. International competitors seized market share. Harlan's empire faced threats from every direction, and Harlan himself began to crack. His health declined, stress-induced episodes that sent him to hospitals he owned. His mother refused his calls. His company's board grew increasingly independent, making decisions without him. For a man who built his entire life around control, the chaos was destroying him. One day, 6 months into Quinn's sentence, Harlan appeared in the prison visiting room. He looked terrible. Thinner, grayer, older than his 50 years. Why are you here? Quinn asked. I don't know. His voice was hoarse. I've been asking myself that for 3 hours while sitting in the parking lot. They sat in silence, separated by scratched plexiglass and bad decisions. Was it worth it? Quinn finally asked. Destroying me? Destroying Brody? Destroying yourself? Harlan touched the scar on his hand. My father's last words to me before he died were, "You'll end up alone just like me." I spent my whole life trying to prove him wrong. Built an empire. Got married. Even tried to connect with my son. And here I am, alone, surrounded by billions of dollars, and not a single person who actually knows me. You made yourself alone, Harlan. You tested everyone until they broke, then blamed them for breaking. I know. His eyes met hers. I'm sorry. For what it's worth, I am genuinely sorry. Quinn felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, but understanding, maybe. Do you want to know something? She said. In a weird way, prison freed me. I don't have to perform anymore. I don't have to chase visibility or prove I matter. I just exist, and that's enough. Harlan nodded slowly. I envy that. You could have it too. Let go of control. Let the empire run itself. Let people surprise you instead of testing them to failure. I don't know how. Then learn. You're brilliant at building systems. Build one for trust. Harlan stood to leave, then paused. The clinics are helping people. Real people. I thought you should know that. After he left, Quinn returned to her cell and cried. Not from sadness. Exactly. But from a strange, complicated grief of mourning something that never really existed in the first place. 2 years into Quinn's sentence, something unexpected happened. The reforms forced on Pharmaceutical actually worked. Independent oversight led to price reductions on life-saving medications. Transparency initiatives exposed industry-wide price-fixing cartels. The company's example pressured competitors to follow suit. Quinn's clinics, now Pharmaceutical subsidiaries, expanded to 17 locations across 8 states, providing affordable care to over 200,000 patients annually. Her name wasn't on anything. She got no credit. But people were being helped. Lives were being saved. And in her cell, reading news articles about the changes, Quinn felt something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not for herself. For the idea. For the proof that even broken people could create something that mattered. Meanwhile, Brody served his sentence in a different facility, wrestling with his own demons. His cellmate was a former pharmaceutical rep who'd sold opioids to vulnerable communities. They'd talk late into the night about the industry's sins. You really thought you were different? The rep asked. You thought stealing from your dad and using your girlfriend made you a hero? I thought I was dismantling corruption, Brody admitted. I thought the ends justified the means. And now I think I was just angry. At my dad, at myself, at being second place. I dressed up my anger as ideology and convinced myself I was righteous. What are you going to do when you get out? Brody was quiet for a long time. Start over. For real this time. No shortcuts. No stolen money. Just actually help people instead of using them to prove something. In another facility, in another state, Quinn had the same realization. 4 years later, Quinn walked out of prison into a world that had mostly forgotten her. There were no cameras, no crowds, no visibility. Just Daphne, her lawyer, waiting with a car. Where do you want to go? Daphne asked. Quinn thought about it. Brooklyn, the first clinic. They drove to the facility that had started everything. It had a new name now, Pharmaceutical Community Health, but the mission was the same. Quinn stood outside, watching patients come and go. Families getting affordable treatment. Kids leaving with medications their parents could actually pay for. A young doctor exited, noticed Quinn, and paused. "You're Quinn Harlow," he said quietly. I heard about what you tried to do. Before everything went wrong." He gestured to the clinic. "This place exists because of you. The idea, even if it doesn't have your name anymore." Quinn felt tears prick her eyes. "Does it help people?" "Every single day." After he left, Quinn sat on a bench across the street and just watched, invisible again. But this time, it didn't hurt. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "I'm getting out next month. I don't expect forgiveness, but I wanted you to know I'm sorry. For all of it. B." Quinn stared at the message for a long time. Then she typed back, "I hope you find what you're looking for. Just make sure it's real this time." Another text arrived, this one from Harlan. "The clinics serve their 500,000th patient today. Thought you'd want to know." Quinn allowed herself a small smile. Harlan was still controlling everything, still orchestrating from the shadows. But at least now, his control was creating something good. Her phone rang. "Daphne, there's a community health nonprofit in Chicago looking for someone to help design accessible care programs. No executive role, no spotlight, just background work. You interested?" Quinn thought about visibility, about structure, about the cost of chasing things that didn't matter. "Yeah," she said. "I'm interested." 6 months later, Harlan Voss stood in the PharmaForge headquarters boardroom, surrounded by the independent directors who'd slowly taken power from him. "We're voting to take the company public," the chairwoman said. "Complete transparency. No more hidden ownership. You'll still be the largest shareholder, but you won't have absolute control anymore." Harlan felt his father's ghost whisper in his ear, "Chaos." But he looked at the scar on his hand and thought about Quinn's words. "Build a system for trust." "Fine," he said, "but I have conditions." "Which are?" "The community clinics remain protected, funded in perpetuity. No profit seeking. Ever." The board exchanged glances. "Agreed." After the meeting, Harlan drove to Brooklyn, to the clinic, the one Quinn had built with stolen money and broken dreams. He stood where she'd stood, watching patients come and go. His phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "I saw the news about the company going public. I'm proud of you for letting go." Another text, this one from Brody. "Got a job at a free clinic in Baltimore. Starting at the bottom. It feels right. Thanks for teaching me what structure means, even if it took me years to understand." Harlan stood in the growing darkness, watching lights flicker on in apartment windows across the street. People living their ordinary lives. Struggling, loving, failing, trying again. All of it chaotic and messy and beautiful. And for the first time in his life, Harlan Voss didn't try to control it. He just watched and whispered to the ghost of his father, "You were wrong. Structure isn't about control. It's about building something strong enough to hold people when they fall. That's the difference between us." Then he went home to his empty mansion and, for the first time in 23 years, slept through the night. So here's the question that's going to keep you up tonight. Was anyone in this story actually the villain? Was it Quinn, who stole and betrayed? Was it Harlan, who manipulated and tested? Was it Brody, who pretended and destroyed? Or were they all just broken people making terrible choices because of wounds they never healed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear who you think was right, who was wrong, and what you would have done differently. If this story made you think, made you feel, made you question your own choices, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that even broken people can create something that matters. And subscribe, because I'm bringing you more stories that dig into the messy, complicated truth of being human. Remember, visibility isn't the same as value. Control isn't the same as strength. And sometimes, the greatest empires are built by people who finally learn to let go. I'll see you in the next story. Until then, build something that matters, even if nobody ever knows your name. Sometimes the cure for what breaks us is learning to live with the scars. The end.